Explosion in Donbas. Ukrainian armed forces blew up occupiers in a gas pipeline. Ukrainian armed forces are taking back Crimea. Missile attacks on the peninsula are changing the course of the war. Urgent. A palace coup in the Kremlin? A Putin ally who advocated for peace has resigned. Lawlessness in Putin's army. A 19-year-old contract soldier complains that his own people want to kill him. A fire in Bashkortostan. But Ukrainian drones attacked Gazprom. A scandalous arrest in Lithuania. A group of Russian agents who organized 4 terrorist attacks in the EU was detained. Shock! Propagandist Solovyov leaked the database of a secret Russian army unit. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dmitrovskaya. Right now, let's talk about the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. Something happened in Russia that I personally did not expect. Putin fired his longtime ally, his loyal dog, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Kremlin, Dmitry Kozak. He was the overseer of the annexed Crimea, and since 2020, the main person responsible for integrating the occupied territories. According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, Kozak is leaving, or rather being made to leave, because of his desire to end the war with Ukraine.
This is likely Putin's decision to push out from his inner circle a high-ranking Kremlin official, after he expressed his desire to put an end to the war in Ukraine. This once again demonstrates that Putin and his advisors are uniting around their commitment to continuing the war in Ukraine and around Putin's maximalist military demands.
The conflict had been brewing for a long time, since Kozak and the man in the bunker already disagreed back in 2022. He was the only one in Putin's inner circle who, at the Russian Security Council meeting 3 days before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, spoke out against launching a full-scale war. And this disagreement was noticeable during Kozak's speech at that same Security Council meeting.
Whether here or later, I just wanted to answer the question about whether to annex or not to annex Donbas. What to do with it next, how to use it in negotiations with the West, because this is a very serious problem.
So what? Let's just limit ourselves for now regarding your speech.
Which is coming to an end. Resignation.
Kozak's resignation has already been confirmed by Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov, who says he left of his own accord. What do you think? Are there still dissenters in Putin's inner circle, or is everyone just dancing to Pleshivoy's tune? In Dugin, which is in the Rostov region, an unknown person set fire to an electrical substation. It burned to the ground, as reported by the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation, Petr Andriushchenko. Also last night, friendly drones attacked. There were explosions in Saratov, Kursk, Belgorod, Bryansk, and in the Volgograd region, there was a fire at one of the largest oil refineries serving the needs of the Russian army. More friendly drones, so to speak, lit up Gazprom in Bashkortostan, and it's burning pretty well there too. Something's not right here. And in Donbas, the AFU blew up a gas pipeline through which the enemy was supplying Kupiansk. And now the Russians are forced to cross the Oskil River using boats and rafts. This was reported by the commander of the 429th Unmanned Systems Regiment, Achilles Yuri Fedorenko.
At present, the issue with the gas pipeline has been resolved by the defense forces. They blew it up. But whether the enemy will be able to restore it a second time is unclear, because this isn't the first time we've put it out of commission. Because it is located in temporarily occupied territory for obvious reasons, we cannot dig it up, since the enemy is constantly targeting it with their artillery, drones, and so on. But we did manage to damage it with our firepower.
Fierce street fighting with enemy assault groups continues in Kupiansk, but the occupiers do not control any district of the city. Meanwhile, there was sabotage in the Zaporizhzhia region, resulting in the loss of 18 officers from the headquarters of Russia's 35th Army. Due to smoke from the command post, the staff was overcome by carbon monoxide and the operational personnel of the headquarters could not escape. We will provide detailed updates on the situation at the front in our next report.
Ukraine is changing its tactics at the front, which has allowed it to go on the offensive. There are now 2 Russian encirclements in Donetsk region and the prospect of a cauldron in Sumy region. Russia tortures its own soldiers who refuse to participate in assaults. Puar has published intercepted conversations of the occupiers' command, as well as the spectacular destruction of a Russian command post in Donetsk. The Pokrovsk enemy group has lost its leadership. Everything happening at the front today. Watch it right now. The AFU is changing its tactics. This is being reported by a number of military analysts, including the former head of foreign intelligence, Mykola Malomouch. According to him, thanks to the fact that our troops have moved out of a purely defensive posture and started using flanking strikes, a number of settlements along the entire front line have already been liberated.
It's very important that the new tactics have allowed us to act unexpectedly for the enemy. He couldn't concentrate strike groups or build defensive lines. He's not at all used to defending himself systematically. That's why the new elements in our operations have allowed us to achieve, for now, sectoral tactical results. But they are significant.
First of all, it is worth noting the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Donetsk region, which remains the main direction of the Russian offensive. Despite the enemy grouping of more than 100,000, analysts note that the defense forces managed to liberate a settlement there and at the same time organize 2 encirclements of enemy units.
Ukrainian forces have liberated the village of Pankivka in the Donetsk region, further tightening the encirclement of the remaining Dobropilya salient. According to preliminary data, Russian soldiers to the north are already surrounded. 2 encirclement rings have formed there, with the infantry inside being supplied by air using drones.
The unsuccessful attempts to help their units escape from these pockets have played into the hands of our fighters, who are fighting on the hottest front of recent months, Pokrovsk. After all, today Russia is forced to disperse its forces and significantly reduce the pressure on the northern outskirts of the city.
Pokrovsk. Today it is obvious that for the Russians this was their number one objective. During this offensive, accordingly, it has not been achieved today, just as, well, probably in general, we should talk about the Pokrovsk-Mednograd agglomeration, which has slowed the enemy's advance. Let me remind you that it is mainly the 51st Combined Arms Army of the Russian Federation fighting here, reinforced by a large number of units, some of which have already arrived from Sumy region. Later they were redeployed to Zaporizhia, but they did not stay there long because it was urgently necessary to provide support. And today they are trying to do just that, those units that managed to carry out this flash mob in Dobropilya.
At the same time, another support for our fighters in Pokrovsk the day before came from the Air Force, which very successfully attacked a command post in Donetsk. Footage of the strike on the Russian headquarters has already spread across the internet.
It's clear that these strikes were not random, especially in this direction. Firstly, it's true that the headquarters and command of exactly those army units and formations fighting on the Pokrovsk front had gathered in Donetsk. Accordingly, we understand that by leaving these troops without leadership, it takes time to appoint new commanders, even if only acting ones for now. In other words, in any case, the chain of command is disrupted.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian command notes that the Kremlin itself may soon change its tactics, especially in the battles for Pokrovsk. The small assault groups that tried all summer to capture this stronghold did not achieve the desired result. Therefore, Moscow may abandon its strategic ideas in favor of intensifying regular meat grinder assaults.
Flanking maneuvers. You remember, we talked about at least 3 directions. An attempt to bypass and encircle Pokrovsk, Mirnorad and Kostyantinivka, accordingly to almost reach the rear and occupy these cities. I think that if the enemy does not achieve their goal, today they will likely try, first of all, to use mechanized components. And accordingly, they might even attempt a frontal assault.
But there are fewer and fewer Russians willing to attack head-on. The main intelligence directorate reported that the number of deserters in the occupiers' units has increased significantly. At the same time, the Russian command has decided to either execute or torture such soldiers.
They caught me. I thought they wouldn't catch me. Soon again. Soon the punitive squads will come for you. Though, he'll be with broken arms and legs. We'll all get out of here someday. Also as well,
Analysts note a significant increase in successful desertions. After the Russian paratroopers and Marines were withdrawn from there to reinforce the Pokrovsky offensive, the remaining forces simply aren't able to withstand the pressure from the defense forces.
Just east of Tetkino, Ukrainian troops are gradually pushing the enemy back across the state border, that is, to the north. There, the border runs with Russia to the north and Ukraine to the south. Not long ago, the Ukrainian village of Kondratovka was liberated in this area. Now it's the turn of the village of Alexievskaya. The Russians admit that, in general, they will likely lose this settlement soon, but they still keep clinging to it. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops have encircled this village in a pincer movement and are preventing the Russians from supplying their militants. At the same time,
experts believe that similar operations may soon increase, especially considering recent insider information from the US. For example, the Financial Times reports that the United States will send 33,000 AI-powered drones to Ukraine by the end of the year. According to forecasts, these UAVs will be used in so-called swarms and will be able to independently coordinate attacks on Russian positions.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do that, write them words of encouragement in the comments, because we know they are watching us. Ukraine is taking back Crimea several times a week. There are powerful strikes on the peninsula. Ukrainian drones and missiles are scorching the ground beneath the occupiers' feet. What is the situation on the occupied Russian-controlled peninsula? More on this in our report.
Crimea under the crosshairs. The temporarily occupied peninsula is at the center of attention for Ukrainian special services. The Ukrainian armed forces have been increasingly harassing the peninsula and successfully inflicting defeats on the enemy. Reports of successful operations by various units are appearing almost every week.
The temporarily occupied peninsula, Crimea, is turning into a Chernobyl for the Russian occupiers. At
the beginning of the summer, the security service of Ukraine struck the Crimean bridge for the third time. The underwater supports were severely damaged at the seabed level. This was made possible by 1,100 kilograms of explosives. As a result, the bridge was in a critical condition. And then, Ukrainian armed forces' friendly drones paid a visit to the Russian invaders' airbase in Fardiska, not far from Simferopol, where they successfully struck 2 enemy Mi-8 helicopters. Their estimated value is up to $30 million. A Russian tugboat was also hit. Russian ships are also under the crosshairs of Ukrainian special services. In this case, the main intelligence directorate destroyed a Russian Black Sea Fleet ship near Novorossiysk. The Ukrainian armed forces struck a ship that the Russians had put into service in 2015. Its value is about $60 million.
The Black Sea Fleet has reduced the activity of its operations in the Black Sea Basin to a historic century-low minimum. This is one of the clearest confirmations of the success of the Ukrainian Defense Forces operation. In the main command of the Russian Federation, the Ukrainian Defense Forces and Special Operations Forces at the moment of the destruction of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels. As a result of the successful actions of the Ukrainian Defense Forces and the Ukrainian Armed Forces, about 35% of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels have been destroyed.
And here, Special Forces struck a Russian radar system that is part of the S-400 air defense system. Here is another Yenisei radar from the S-500 system. The destruction or even damage of all these radar systems leads to the disarmament of Russian air defense in Crimea, which is currently represented by 2 anti-aircraft missile regiments.
on the Crimean Peninsula itself, there is a hunt for Russian air defense systems. And Russia has found itself in a hopeless situation. Crimea is a trap for Russian air defense, which is being systematically and methodically destroyed. And this is due to the fact that the territory of the Crimean Peninsula is by its nature enclosed. It is a closed space. It is impossible to relocate positional areas, to change them like gloves, to move them around 24/7.
In other words, for a very short period of time, Russian air defense in Crimea seemed blinded, and quickly so. It is simply impossible to resolve the issue of replacing these enemy systems without withdrawing similar ones from other sites.
This not only affects the defense capability of the peninsula itself, which is temporarily occupied, it also means that it is depleting Russia's overall air defense. That is, across the territory of the Russian Federation itself, the destruction of air defense systems is not such a systematic and constant phenomenon. But it is specifically Crimea, where the destruction of these complexes has become systematic, that is forcing Russia to pull air defense from its mainland to the territory of Crimea. This depletion, this forcing Russia to act as we need, allows us to continue destroying their air defense system.
Over the years of Russian occupation, Crimea has turned into a Russian military base, and the attacks by Ukrainian forces are increasingly destroying the military economy of the aggressor country and its logistics.
Overall, of course, attention will also be paid to the positional areas where these air defense systems are deployed across the temporarily occupied peninsula. Crimea, the same goes for places like Mr. Hankuti, Feodosia, the airfields, and in the end, there are numerous military facilities there connected to military units and so on and so forth. In other words, there are quite a lot of targets across the peninsula as a whole today, which should be struck both by kamikaze drones, attack drones, and by something more powerful with a more powerful warhead.
Crimea is Ukraine, so the armed forces of Ukraine will continue to strike military facilities and legitimate targets until the Russians leave Crimea and liberate the temporarily occupied territories.
Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the States. We Ukrainians are very grateful to you for your support and proud that we have such a reasonable audience. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well where you are watching from and whether people in your country support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, let's move on to the most interesting part. And now, a few fascinating stories about how much Putin values his soldiers. While the Kremlin is busy filming propaganda videos with actors posing as soldiers supposedly being visited by Putin, real soldiers can't even get basic food and medical assistance. That's why an officer of the world's second army is asking people to chip in for groceries.
I want to ask you for help because we have two soldiers in our care, Sadoy and Gymnast, who, as they say themselves, are already too ashamed to ask for help. The guys are stuck in terrible conditions. They have no food, nothing at all, basically. Every time I talk to them on the phone, I end up in tears.
Here's another story worth $1 million. A young soldier who signed a contract for service at 18 was denied surgery after being wounded.
Putin, just please. They write that everything is perfectly fine and completely all right, but what exactly happens immediately after a significant wound occurs? Sometimes the bone heals crookedly, it fuses incorrectly, and they don't even want to operate. They say, that's it, whatever happens. I even pleaded with them. Now I ran away, now I'll just take a taxi back, but they throw me into a pit. Not to hide, not to build, not to reset things as they wanted to do. Everything about this situation is entirely legal, as far as I understand. I genuinely do not know the full details, but I cannot imagine that they would ever ask anyone to simply leave without a valid reason.
In general, the Kremlin doesn't value its boys. And if the president doesn't care about the military on whose orders they're fighting in Ukraine, then why should ordinary Russians respect them? That's exactly why Russian soldiers are treated like they're nothing and even get thrown out of restaurants.
So today, my beloved wife, a good friend, and I are enjoying a pleasant stroll around the charming city of Kyiv, taking in all the sights and sounds. And here's the current situation. It turns out that honorable guys who are in military uniform, who have bravely served and continue to faithfully fulfill their important military duty in our beloved country, the mayor of our city, in Kyiv, in our cherished and beloved city, gave a specific order not to let anyone in military uniform into any public cafes or establishments. And now, while being on the bustling Teatralnaya street, when we tried to enter a charming cafe, we were unfortunately not allowed in because I was conspicuously wearing military-style pants and a cap. They told us the exact same thing everywhere we went. You simply can't go in here, not to this particular cafe, not to the second one, not to the third one, and certainly not to the fifth one. It was a truly frustrating and rather bewildering experience, as we simply wanted to enjoy a quiet moment and a warm drink. So today it turns out that the respected mayor of our city, a prominent public figure, has made an important announcement. Our significant participation in the Kyiv conflict has unfortunately put us in a rather difficult situation where we are essentially nobodies here, and absolutely no one truly cares about our plight or our presence.
That's the harsh reality. Putin's heroes are needed by no one. Yesterday, friendly drones attacked another energy facility in Russia. It was intense. In Bashkortostan, that's 1,400 kilometers from Ukraine. Each attack on an oil refinery, despite the authorities' assurances, hits the Kremlin very hard, and more importantly, it hits the budget. But today, we're not talking about the global consequences of strikes on the energy infrastructure, but about ordinary gasoline, or more precisely, its absence. According to media reports, serious problems with gasoline are already being experienced in the Rostov and Voronezh regions, as well as in the Krasnodar territory. Gas stations in the regions are displaying zeros instead of gasoline prices.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Fuel shortages are being felt in other regions of Russia as well, but I'll focus on the Rostov region because a gasoline deficit here, right next to the front line, could mean that gasoline has also disappeared from the occupied Donbas. How did Russia, with its status as the main gas station, end up in this situation? We'll explain further in the report.
Russia, long nicknamed the gas station, has suddenly found itself without gasoline. What once seemed unthinkable is now reality. Gas stations are closing one after another in the regions, the price boards are blank, and there are lines at the pumps. Independent chains are disappearing, major ones are holding on, but even there it's increasingly hard to find regular gasoline or even diesel.
Oh, unbelievable.
The shockwave will reach us soon.
There was a blast at the KNPZ. It was really loud. From 4 to 6, it didn't stop for a moment.
Russia is facing a fuel crisis. Ukrainian drone strikes have destroyed a significant part of the oil refining system.
In a country that has lived for decades off selling oil and fuel, today there is simply nothing to fill up your car with. At first the shortage hit the provinces, but now it has come right up to Moscow.
Previously, Ukraine targeted plants with a capacity of about 6 to 7 million tons of oil refining per year. And to understand just how painful the strike on the Kyiv refinery is, you need to mentally multiply that by 3. This plant is 3 times more powerful than those Ukraine had previously put out of commission.
How did it come to this? It's very simple. The authorities decided that gasoline is needed not for the people, but for the war. Billions of dollars are being spent on missiles that are launched at Ukrainian cities. Russian oil refineries, the country's main fuel kitchens, have become legitimate targets for well-meaning drones. And they are arriving. Crackers, sterns, the central control stops, logistics collapse, and what was once considered a safety margin turned out to be just a facade.
You! And the pump.
What's going on there?
Yes, it's flying. It's worth our house.
But we're not in its trajectory, that's all.
Repair work, fuel shortages, supply disruptions. All of this is now a reality for ordinary Russians. Delays reach up to a month and a half, and in some places the fuel simply never arrives. And if before the gas station country supplied half the world, now it can't even refuel its own regions.
Just a typical situation at a gas station. The same loudspeaker announced that the fuel is running out, so there's no point in waiting in line. Just imagine that whole line won't get any fuel. Dear customers, the fuel is running out. And
here's the picture. More expensive gasoline, kilometer-long lines, and a growing dependence on a few large companies. Small gas stations are dying out, there's no competition, prices keep rising, and the consumer is left hostage.
Naturally, they are absolutely furious. They are desperately trying to get their profound outrage across to the relevant authorities, like, please do something. You absolutely have to do something. What exactly is the army for? What exactly is the air defense for? Something truly significant needs to be done.
Of course, you could believe the words of the Minister of Energy, who promises to adjust refinery repairs and keep price growth within inflation, but can you really still trust these words? While the minister is making statements on air, people are driving from gas station to gas station, searching for even a couple of liters. These so-called temporary difficulties are a direct consequence of the war. Russia is spending its resources on destroying a neighboring country while it is falling apart from within. When drones strike factories, it's no longer just a news headline, it's a reality that everyone can see, from Siberia to the Volga region and from Kuban to the center of the country. The irony is that for decades, the Kremlin blackmailed the world with oil and gas, and now it has come face to face with its own weapon. Fuel has become scarce at home, and this is only the beginning. If the situation doesn't change, Moscow itself risks ending up in the very position it once took pride in, waiting in line at an empty fuel pump.
There wasn't a single one left. I hope this is just temporary, due to some kind of... No.
I don't know if Vladimir Solovyov will be punished, considering that Putin has already almost lost 2 propagandists with the Simonyan-Asayan family. At the very least, they won't be patted on the head for this. And it's all because Solovyov, quite frankly, really screwed up and revealed the location of a top-secret facility. I'd even say he flushed it down the toilet. The thing is, the Kremlin's dark-mouthed mouthpiece, Vladimir Solovyov, did a report from the secret Rubicon command center. Well, how secret was it, really? Now it's not so secret anymore, because in the video they didn't blur out the bathrooms, and OSINTers were able to use them to determine the location. The center is located in Patriot Park in the Moscow region, but besides revealing the location, Solovyov also exposed the identity of Rubicon's commander. And thanks to certificates and awards, it was possible to establish that it's Yevgeny Shmirin. Yes, the desire to show off with their unparalleled models led to quite the opposite result. We've long understood that India has very good relations with Russia. Just consider the embrace between the country's Prime Minister Modi and Putin on the very day of Russia's strike on the hospital in Kamadid. A lot about the relationship between the countries is also revealed by the fact that India is a major importer of Russian oil. But even that wasn't enough. New Delhi went further in deepening its ties with Moscow, to the point where, as reported by TASS, Indian military personnel are now participating in Russian-Belarusian exercises in Belarus.
The Indian Ministry of Defense has sent 65 soldiers, including members of the Kumaon regiment, to the Mulino training ground, about 40 miles west of Nizhny Novgorod. The military personnel will take part in joint training, tactical exercises, and weapons handling drills.
I wonder, will Indian soldiers go to the front next, on the side of the Russian armed forces? Not again, but once more. In Lithuania, Russian agents were caught who had organized 4 terrorist attacks in Europe.
A pre-trial investigation revealed that in July 2024, a Lithuanian citizen, together with accomplices, sent 4 packages containing homemade explosive and incendiary devices from Vilnius to various European countries using DHL and DPD delivery services. 2 packages were addressed to and sent by DHL cargo planes to the United Kingdom, while the others were sent to Poland by DPD cargo trucks. 1 package caught fire at Leipzig airport, another in a truck in Poland, and a third at the DHL warehouse in Birmingham, UK. The 4th package, which was headed to Poland, did not catch fire due to a defect in the ignition device.
We are talking about 15 Russian agents originally from Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and even Ukraine. Another piece of news from Lithuania. While Poland is asking for nuclear weapons, Lithuania is opening a drone school where children from the age of 10 and adults are taught to fly, assemble, and program drones. One of these 9 schools was opened just 20 kilometers from the Russian city of Kaliningrad. The threat to Russia is more than real, but unfortunately, not all countries in the risk zone are actually taking real steps to prepare for confrontation with the Kremlin. Still, as we can see, there is some progress. In Belarus, the BULBASH base has started operating, and no, this is not a joke, but rather a kind of mockery of Lukashenko's henchmen. The base, with its very telling name, was created by the Belarusian opposition, and it contains data on employees of law enforcement agencies connected to the activities of Alexander Lukashenko's regime. These are
representatives of the armed forces, state security agencies, internal affairs and border services, who, with weapons in hand, protect the peace and order of Belarus. We saw this in 2020. The security forces, like true atlases, hold up the clear sky of our country on their shoulders, and they will definitely continue to do so.
BULBASH already contains information on more than 16,000 security officers. A song was dedicated to Irina Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee brutally murdered in the USA. American rapper DaBaby released a song called Save Me, which translates as Save Me. In the video, they recreated the scene of the girl's murder, but changed the ending of the story so that the killer was stopped. Let me remind you, on August 22nd in the USA, Irina Zarutska was brutally murdered on public transport by a homeless man with mental disorders. The king is on Ukraine's side. British monarch Charles III, during a dinner with US President Donald Trump, called for peace and, of course, urged Trump himself to support Ukraine.
Today, as tyranny once again threatens Europe, we and our allies are uniting in support of Ukraine to contain the aggression.
Trump nodded at the king's words, but we have never doubted Britain's support, whether from the government or the royal family. For the first time, the US government has approved sending military aid to Ukraine, paid for by Panata's allies. This was reported by Reuters, citing 2 sources. According to the agency, Deputy Defense Minister Elbridge Colby approved 2 shipments totaling $500 million. All the details are known to our journalists.
The US has approved the first arms deliveries to Ukraine funded by NATO, even though just 2 months ago this was only being discussed.
We won't pay anything for this, but we will send weapons. For us, this will be a business opportunity. And we will send them Patriot systems, which they desperately need, because Putin has really surprised a lot of people.
According to Reuters, Deputy Head of the Pentagon Elbridge Colby approved 2 arms shipments to Ukraine, each worth $500 million.
Obviously, in the first 2 packages approved by Elbridge Colby at the Pentagon, the main focus will still be on air defense systems. Given the significant amount, it's abundantly clear that we're not talking about the standard Patriot missile systems, but rather specifically about the highly advanced PAC-3 missiles, which are always in critically short supply and are utilized directly and effectively to shoot down incoming Russian ballistic missiles. Additionally, AM-9 missiles may also be supplied to further bolster defensive capabilities.
Nevertheless, Pearl has become a new format for transferring weapons to Ukraine. Ally money, but weapons from American stockpiles.
Recently, the esteemed Financial Times, a prominent and widely respected publication, reported on significant and pressing problems with the critical supply of absolutely essential missile munitions for the very same air defense systems that are so vital for Ukraine's ongoing defense efforts, a situation which was subsequently explained by a thorough and comprehensive audit of the Pentagon's existing stockpiles and reserves. But now it is abundantly clear that a comprehensive new program and new procedures have already been effectively put in place, and this significant development will now help us to receive the absolutely necessary weapons.
Allied plans provide for supplying Ukraine with up to $10 billion worth of weapons, but so far we have only received 2 packages totaling $1 billion.
$1 billion is not a fantastic sum. It is what actually renews the necessary critical supplies. For us only now, according to a truly new procedure under a new
program. But what about the timeline? The American side has not yet made any official statements about the deliveries, which means we also cannot know the timeline.
We do not have official confirmation from the Pentagon, as we did, for example, with the Iran missiles, where it was clearly stated who would pay, how they would be procured, and what the next steps would be. So far, there has been no such announcement.
And although Trump shifted the funding for armaments to Europe, the new aid mechanisms demonstrate positive relations between Kyiv and Washington.
Of course, the timelines and deliveries of what is needed for the defense forces are insufficient, but nevertheless, this is a working mechanism that shows we currently have a completely healthy development of our relations with Washington. Yes, it's certainly not without its inherent problems. Yes, there are indeed different views and perspectives on certain specific aspects of the ongoing negotiation track, but nevertheless, when it comes to absolutely critical supplies for essential air defense systems, Washington is consistently providing the necessary minimum that is genuinely expected from it.
And finally, how might Moscow respond to this? Washington's approval is both a signal to its allies and a challenge to the Kremlin.
In this case, we understand that the main focus of aggression from the Kremlin is directed at European partners, while attempts are being made to whitewash Trump. The only one who might participate in such an attack specifically against the 47th President of the United States is Dmitry Medvedev, who could write a mocking post about it. So there will be some kind of reaction, but it will be very softening so as not to spoil the relationship between Putin and Trump.
Meanwhile, the Financial Times also reports that the US will send 33,000 AI-powered drones to Ukraine by the end of the year.
And returning to the meeting between Trump and the King of the United Kingdom, Donald Trump may be president, but he's not exactly well versed in etiquette, let alone the rules of conduct with members of the royal family. That's probably why Trump would sometimes walk ahead of the king during their stroll, or slap him on the back like a buddy. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. For now, give this video a like to support what we do. Be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you soon!